this year we are so happy that Maria Martinez's great-granddaughter, Barbara Gonzales, who carries on her tradition with her son, Cavan, did I get all the names right? Yeah. Excellent. Is not only going to give a talk about her work and about Maria Martinez's work, but this is for the first time, just like yesterday we had our first musical piece. For the first time, we're going to have a pottery demonstration after she gives her PowerPoint talk. And she's going to show you how this pottery is made. So this is going to be a really special presentation. We're going to leave an hour and a half for it so that she can do everything. And we're just so pleased to have Barbara Gonzales here. Thank you so much. And we've been asked to make sure that for everybody, including questions, we need you to talk into a microphone because there are, see, I'm doing it myself. We need you to talk into the microphone because the people in the meme room, we're waving to them. Everybody wave to them down the hall. They can't hear us if we don't talk into a microphone somehow. So everybody up here and everybody who asks questions, please wait for the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Gonzales.
Can we get a... Okay. No way. Okay. Can everybody hear? Yes. Oh, okay. Before I begin our talk, I would like to give a little invocation in my Tewa language, because wherever we go, you know, our spirits go with us, and before I begin, I would like to give an invocation in Tewa. Kuda woha ne ta no rikandi sa wondi na bisawe pa weki yamiri erawari hicha bayekibo no e na bit oa na bisaya na bitete. Our grandparents, great grandparents, then no edi poari. Ero baiki bori kage buiri kiribo di hichang de umbi eri ero kuda waha ne ta no rikandi era next Saint Steve wa kuda waha nambi sawe no ho ekandi ero ne otu yo waba minikana turi. Thank you for being all here today. Good morning. And you know, we are very honored to be here. You know, in all the times that we have done presentation here in Santa Fe, we've demonstrated outside the different museums. But this is the first time we've ever been given this honor of being in an auditorium, doing a PowerPoint, and given an intellectual talk about the various processes that the pottery making goes through. We've done this in different museums throughout the United States, art centers. We just returned from Sacramento, where we were a part of the Pueblo Masters Dynasty show, and it was very nicely presented. So again, I would like to show my appreciation, and I mentioned Steve. Thank you for having us out here and thinking about us and letting us be a part of this presentation. Beside me is my son, my eldest son. I've got 4 sons, just like my great-grandmother. She had 4 sons. I have 4 sons. Believe me, I tried. After the first one, the next one will be a girl. Nope. The next one will be a girl. Nope. The next one will be a girl. The 4th try, that's it. So this is my eldest son, Cavan Gonzales, and he will speak about certain portions of our demonstration. Pueblo Dynasty's Master Potters is the name of the exhibit that was being held in Sacramento at the Crocker Museum. So if you get a chance, go see it. It's a very nice exhibit. Pieces that I had done years back, and I was very surprised to see them, because these pieces, whenever we work on, are one of a kind. So I don't keep it to memory what was on there, but it was very nice to meet all the pottery that was in there, because we think of them as people. So I was saying hello to everybody as we walked in to see our exhibit. This is yours truly, and these are some of the pieces that I have with me, and that are not here, but these are mine, and my name of my store is Sunbeam Indian Arts. It's San Alfonso Pueblo, so if you're ever touring, go down and visit our store. We have pottery and paintings there, because part of my family tradition was we come from a family of painters as well. Maria Martinez, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, Adam Martinez, Santana, they were all painters as well. So we come from one section of clay work and the other one painting. The other one is jewelry, because my grandmother's brother was Awasiri, Alfonso Roybal, and he had an exhibit last year that was at the Heard Museum, so we were a part of being there and seeing the exhibit as well and talking to people. This is my eldest son, Cavan, who's right beside me, and he will share the podium with me. He is, how would I say, educated as far as ceramics and art is concerned. He has a degree from Alfred University in upstate New York. The first one that you see, well, there it is, I don't know, is the tree at San Alfonso Pueblo, and this is our plaza area, the visitor center that you'll see as you're coming into the Pueblo. And this is a view, area view from the Black Mesa. There were visitors allowed to go on top of the Black Mesa maybe about 30, 40 years ago, but that had to stop because people started removing things from there. There is a story that goes that someone removed things and he had a hard time with his health. He had nightmares, and that didn't stop until he returned whatever he took from the Black Mesa. So that put a stop to everybody going up, but as Pueblo members, tribal members, we are allowed to go up there. This is yours truly as a little girl. And I lived with my great-grandmother. I knew a part of her that no one else would ever know, and she was a tremendous person. She would put down whatever she was doing to greet people that came to see her. I lived with her from about age 4 till I was in the 4th grade. So during that time, without knowing, I was being educated in clay work and getting a feel for it firsthand. And there's no formal teaching. This is all informal. You learn by watching and doing. And this is the same principle on which I base my teaching with my own children and grandchildren. Look and look and learn and listen. Because one of the things that she taught me as a little girl is remember what you see. Remember what you do. Don't forget where you've been. One of these days, all these things will become very important to you. Little did I know. And she's making bread. Oh.
There.
Okay. She's making bread right here, and my road to my house, to my store, is right in the back, and it goes into the hills, and you'll come to Sunbeam Indian Arts. But this, my great-grandmother did, was make bread in the horno, the bread oven. And it was interesting to see her making bread, but as a little girl, I didn't pay attention to the baking technique. And later on, I finally learned. In this demonstration, these are Cavan's hands, and the clay body that you see right here. Oh, shoot, I keep forgetting to. Yep, he warned me, because the pointer button is right beside it. Anyway, these are the clay bodies that you'll see later on. It's a volcanic ash deposit and a clay mixed together in equal proportions, and this is the recipe that my great-grandmother used. And they're all found locally. Now the clays are mixed together with hands, and this process looks like it's easy, but you have to be careful. You can't make it too wet. If you make the clays too wet, unless you have other clays beside you, you have to let it sit aside and it's ready for use. But usually my husband, and I forgot to introduce him. Robert, if you could wave your hand. He is my clay mixer. But this process, when my grandparents did it, was on the floor. Now, he does it sometimes on the floor, but most of the time it's on a table. Why? Because you need a steady surface so that the table doesn't jump on you, and you have to exert enough pressure so that it can be a clay that will be used in the pottery making. Usually when he mixes my clay, it's about 2 months in advance or a month, but not the day before. Just like bread, it needs to set aside to naturally get, binding. Because if it's too loose, it won't hold the shape. These are polishing stones that my son Cavan has collected over the years, riverbed stones, and through usage they become nice and smooth. I've got several at home that I don't bring with me that were given to me by my grandmother, Santana, my great-grandmother, Maria Martinez, as I started being interested more and more in pottery. This is another process again that this is the pottery, the way it looks, a dry piece, a polished piece, and this is the polishing process. This takes, even for the smallest piece, about 20 minutes to do. So here you see Cavan, oh shoot, there it goes. Oh, okay.
And just use the laser to point.
All right. Yeah. And this is the firing process. The firing process starts in a flat surface, and this is the flat surface after it's been cleaned. You can see the past firing, the fire is so intense that what was gray was white underneath. This is the setup. This is my second son, Aaron, who's helping with the firing process. The pots are inside, it's covered with tin, and then the cow cakes are lined outside and the wood in the pile. Yours truly right here, and this is my grandson, Aaron's son, Jeremy, that's helping in the firing process. My great-grandparents or my grandparents really never had a place to fire, so weather was very important. You can't fire on a windy day, a rainy day, snowy day, but my sons have built me a sheltered area in which I can fire and the weather doesn't affect it. In fact, one of my sons likes to dabble with electricity, so he put in there's lighting in there as well. So if I wanted to fire, I could fire at night. But this is the firing process. Now the cow cakes are burning, and there's an intense flame inside. And it keeps burning, and you allow that fire to die out. And then now there's Cavan. It'll be the process of turning the pottery to black. If we allowed the pottery to just burn at this stage, it will remain red like the red pieces and the polychrome pieces that you see here. But if you smother the fire, which is process is happening right here, is that the pottery will be turning black. Hopefully it be uniformly black. You never know how the fire is going to react, how hot the cow cakes are going to be. Sometimes I need to poke sticks in there, cedar wood, so that it can bring that firing temperature a little bit higher, but that's just all through experience. And this is the finished product. This is the plate by Cavan. And before I forget to mention, every child is given an Indian name at birth, at least for the Pueblo people. And my Indian name at birth was given by my great-grandmother, and it's Tamui. And that is the signature I sign on all my pots, not Barbara. So Tamui translation means sunbeam. So that is the name of my store. Kevin's Indian name was given to him by his grandfather and his great-grandfather. His grandfather, my husband's father, named him Tse Huang. And by coincidence, my grandfather, Adam, also named him that, Tse Huang. So it was meant to be, so his translation of Tse Huang is eagle tail. So that's the signature he signs his pots with, eagle tail and Cavan Gonzales. These are some of our pieces at the summer market, and our pieces are such that they're one of a kind, so I tell people it's hard to duplicate. Even the shapes, maybe the way the firing technique is, how it came out after the firing. So all of them are very different. And I'll let Cavan talk from here. Cavan? Okay, this is there.
Hello, everyone. I'm my mom, Barbara's oldest son, and I grew up in a traditional Pueblo, San Ildefonso, take part in ceremonies, and a lot of the designs that are on our pottery are derived from those natural elements, whether it be ceremonies or hunting, or just enjoying our surroundings, walking about the areas. I learned to make pottery from my mom, but I was very, I would say, fortunate enough that I was here during the time when my great-grandmother was here, Maria, and my great-grandparents, Adam and Santana, my great-aunt Clara, Maria's sister, my grandmother, Anita, and my mom, and also other aunts as well, my mom's sisters. So I got to see everyone working at pretty much at the same time. They would all sit in the floor in a circular area at my great-grandmother's house and all take turns in helping make pottery and polish pottery as well. So I got to see a little bit of everything. My father is Robert Gonzales, and I'm also lucky enough to be here as a young person to see my great-grandparents work on their pottery. Juanita and Louis Gonzales, my great-grandfather Louis is a known painter during his time. And my grandparents, Dolores and my grandmother Dolores and my grandfather Lorenzo Gonzales also were potters as well. So surrounded, and the sister to my grandfather Lorenzo is Crosita Gonzales, also known as Blue Corn. So I was very, very lucky, but everyone were hard workers at home, and I was encouraged during high school to venture and to see how different direction I might take in higher education. So with my mom's help and also with our good friend Susan Peterson, helped me get into school at Alfred University in upstate New York. When I was in school there, I did miss home and red chili a lot. It was too cold there, but I'm glad to be home. And I'm also, as a young person, I was the first Native American to be chosen as a presidential scholar in the arts. So I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, meeting President Ronald Reagan. And along with a long list of other achievements, but I attribute to the encouragement and support of my parents, Barbara and Robert Gonzales, for being where I'm at today.
You might mention the flag that you designed for the state of New Mexico.
Oh yeah, and
75th?
The 75th anniversary of New Mexico statehood. I was the designer of that as well. That was back in 87, 86, around that time. But anyway, I try and keep our polychrome pottery alive, which is the tan pottery. It predates black pottery at my pueblo, but I try and do the contemporary design work on my own work, which you can see the large pieces up above, along with the black pottery and also the black on red ware as well, which is rarely seen these days except in collections. But I'm always learning. My mom is my teacher, and I thank her very much for that. And as we continue in the future, our work will also evolve. I have 5 kids. My oldest is 26. Her name is Shireen Gonzales, and she is also taking our artwork in her own path. She is one of the recent Sundance Film Festival awardee people as well too. So her work is in film. Right now she has her bachelor's, and she's adding on to her degree. She achieved her bachelor's from Fort Lewis College in Durango. Now she's here at the Institute of American Indian Arts, pursuing more avenues in filming and also ceramics as well too. She's constantly learning as well too. But I have a 26-year-old, 21-year-old, 10-year-old, 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So I have my hands full. And my wife, April Gonzales, works at Santa Clara Pueblo with the local PD. So her work schedule's everywhere. So I'm basically Mr. Mom. But,
Go ahead. Switch to the next one.
these are more examples of our artwork. My mom's pieces there, she calls her swish pots. Her pieces are enclosed shapes with beads and clay pieces within them, so it makes like a rattle sound, shallow sound. She graffitos her work, etches, fine etches on her pieces. My brother Aaron also makes pottery, and this is one of his pieces here at Buffalo. My father tends to make animal figurines, a turtle here, and there's a bear here, and he also makes prayer bowls. And you can see little pictures of my mom's paintings here. These are tributed to Awasiri.
Alfonso
Roybal,
who was my grandmother Santana brother.
yeah.
So in honoring him, I did miniature pictures, but I have large pictures as well, and then adding color to my pottery as well.
My mom tends to, on her paintings, she does them on clay washes, so it's all pottery clay. This was a project that was done with the County of Los Alamos, the Public Arts Project. These are gigantic concrete pots that were chosen as artists from San Ildefonso, of descendants of other families of potters or painters, to make pots from San Ildefonso in styles of different eras. So these are quite large.
Yeah, they're in public display in White Rock. And if you pay attention to the side as you're driving up, and you would need to get to White Rock to go to Bandelier National Monument. So as you're going along the White Rock, the town of White Rock, be sure and look on the left and the right of the sidewalks. You'll see the big pots, and they're really tall, on display, and they're permanent display.
This is a picture of us artists with the pieces there when it was finished. This is another art project here done here for the state of New Mexico with the city of Santa Fe through the public arts projects. This is a teepee that I did for them. It's full-scale teepee. I've never painted a teepee before, but it was all pottery design. And I brought the youth involved in helping me paint the designs on the canvas. This is a picture of it up. This was at the Buffalo Thunder Resort in Pewaukee. This is a picture of me and my daughter here, Shireen, and this is her finishing Fort Lewis College a few years back.
And she was also the one that helped me put the PowerPoint together. I thought she would be here. She is. She's babysitting her younger brother and sisters now. But it's very interesting that as I was growing up, I was encouraged to go seek higher education. I've got my degree in education, but never could get the nerve to go to an 8-to-5 job teaching. But what I've done is I've worked with college professors, teachers, telling them how to possibly do different projects with Indian students or to encourage art in their public schools. So, with the years of experience, I'm glad that now I have grandkids that have pursued degrees. And I've got another one who is in special education, and she's working with mentally disabled students, and she's working in Durango, Colorado. But, with the many things that we have done, and we have encouraged all Native people, whenever we talk to young people, please keep on going for education, no matter what. Thank you, and this is the end of our presentation as far as the PowerPoint is concerned. Now we'll go into the actual demonstration. And Cavan is going to begin by doing what you have seen on the PowerPoint. I hope, can you still hear me? I forget I might be covering it. The clay is found locally in our hills. It's right behind where I live and where my great-grandmother used to gather her clays. I remember going with her, dragging a bag along so that we can put the clays inside it. And without thinking, you never thought that, well, here are natural resources that we use, but those natural resources need to be protected. Go ahead, Kevin, you can. And these are equal amounts of volcanic ash deposit. It might be bluish in color, it might be gray, it might be even white, depending on where you get the volcanic ash. And it's just mixed together in equal amounts with using water to get a fine, nice, even texture. For those of you that cooked, and I think many of you bake cakes and cookies, you have to have that consistency. Or some of you that make tortillas. So as we gather the clays outside, we say prayers over it, that there'll be more, that it will be more for the generations to come. And this is pretty interesting because I've served on different committees throughout the states on different boards, and one of the boards I served on was Northern New Mexico Citizens Advisory Board, which dealt with nuclear waste and how to protect ourselves and the public at large. So until I became aware that we need to take into account all the different elements that are involved. Keep in mind that Los Alamos is located on San Alfonso ancestral lands. So we're the only tribe that borders Los Alamos. So in order to get to Los Alamos, you have to go through our reservation. And I did my student teaching at White Rock, and it was interesting to find out that not many kids or their parents knew that just on the other side of the fence is Indian land. And in order to get to their house, they had to go through Indian land. But of course now with the highway going through, but it was interesting in such a way that over the years that I've had my pottery shop at San Ildefonso Pueblo, there weren't that many people coming in from Los Alamos, or they, never said we're from Los Alamos. So as the years have gone by, we've had more and more people coming in. I think it was just a route that they took to work and back home again or whatever, but, very little interest. Now the Fred Harvey, and this is Fred Harvey Week, and while Kevin is mixing, I want to tell you a little bit about during my time with my great-grandmother, the tourists would come to her house, and people would always, come in. She had a little a store, and it was just pottery set on the tables. The paintings were on the walls, and as people were coming in, sometimes I would get tired, and I would slip under the table and sit there and listen to people. Or play underneath the table as the people were looking at the pots and stuff. And, I never actually understood how famous she was, or the word famous. She was just a grandmother to me. And she was such that she had her time of working with clay from sunup till about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sunup meaning that's the first sounds that I heard was pounding on the table with making the clay and mixing the clay body in such a way that it's now ready for putting the clay work on the pot, on the puki, which is just the clay base itself, shaped as such, and this is what we use as a wheel. So this is what is turning. Kevin will go ahead and demonstrate making a pot now. And again, what my great-grandmother used were shapers that were gourds. So these are the shapers that we use. And they're just from gourds, squash, just dried, and then the outlining skin, the inside is removed, and the outlining skin is nice and smooth. These are the shapers that we used.
You want me to polish?
Huh? No, go ahead and make a pot with that while your hands are... Get the water. And it might not hold as well, simply because, like I stated, when you first make the clay, it's too soft, and it might not hold, but he'll try and just demonstrate fast on how a pot is made. So the first shape is a tortilla flat shape, and he's put in to make the shape, and the turning of the wheel is the buki being turned around and round. So the only thing done with it is that a shape is made, and it's just fired. I have some bukis that my great-grandmother used, and I have a couple that my grandmother used, and the dates are written on the bottom of them. I have my own and that I've made, but my great-grandmother and my grandmother's, they have the dates on there. One is, I believe, is 1932, 1927, so they last a very long time. So you take care of them and use it, and it becomes, without thinking, a treasured piece that I now use when I'm demonstrating. The next process that happens after the pot is made, it kind of looks rough. Can you clue in over here? Okay. So this is what it looks like when it's rough. After it's dried, sanded, wet wiped with a cloth, and now it's ready for polishing. These two pieces are ready for polishing. So as Kevin works on that, I'll work on it some more, and he's going to demonstrate the polishing phase. The polishing phase is about the longest time we sit, because once we begin the polishing, we have to sit there until it's finished, and that usually takes about 20 minutes. But just to give a demonstration, he will attempt to try and polish a piece. So Kevin, I can finish that, and then clean your hands. People were wondering, why do you want 3 tables? Don't you want them all together? I said, no. One is a wet area. One is a dry area. One is the finished product. So you want to sit up in front?
Yeah.
Okay, he'll sit up in front so you can see him polishing. And polishing is part of a learning process that Grandma always tells her sons and my grandchildren. In order to become a good potter, you must learn how to make a pot, how to make the clay, make a pot, and polish the ware.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, he's getting it. And again, this process takes about 20 minutes, even for the smallest piece.
Oh, can you hand me the towels?
The what?
No, down below.
Oh, you got your towel.
Yeah.
Kevin, can you sit so the camera can see you? Because people are actually seeing it up behind you.
So you're going to have to turn around.
Okay.
For the polishing phase, we use a red clay deposit, and the only thing done with the red clay is that it's dissolved in water, and that is the liquid he is mixing to put on the pot, on a dry pot. There are a lot of potters that make the pots, nothing else. There's a lot of potters that polish, nothing else. There are some designers that just design pots. But Grandma's thing is that you must learn the different phases so that you can continue and you can be on your own. So all my grandchildren that have touched clay and worked with clay have polished. So we would sometimes sit maybe 5 people together, just like during my age when I was small. I would watch my great-grandmother sit down with her sister Clara, and my grandmother Santana, my mother, and myself. I started polishing at a very early age, and the sad thing that I felt at that time was I was missing out social time with my friends. I was the eldest of 8 children of my mother's family, mothers and my father, so this was my contribution in supporting the family. So the rest of my schoolmates would be outside playing. I was sitting inside polishing. But it taught me a very good lesson. It taught me to listen, not to talk too much, because this is the quietest period that we have is when we're polishing.
And I'm the guy that sells it.
He had to learn. Yeah, the clay is too soft now, so I'll just try and make a round bowl. And this is what I heard when I'm growing up. When I woke up in the morning, my grandmother making her pots. And the smell of clay. Back then, there was a lot of adobe walls, and when the adobe walls are wet, you can smell the clay. And as kids, we liked the taste of clay. In working with young students, there was a little boy one time that I told that story to, and he saw the clay, and he had a little bit of clay, popped it in his mouth right away. And from then on, everybody at that particular time was watching him to see how his pots would turn out. And that's what we're told, you have to ingest it so they can become a part of you. And depending on who the polisher is, we use about 6 coats of the red slip, and then polished begin soon afterwards. Once you begin this process, you cannot say, I got to take a bathroom break. I got to answer the phone. Nope, once you sit down to polish, you have to continue. And you can't tell someone how to polish. They would have to experience it themselves, because each of us have different pressure on what we apply on, maybe how we grip the stone, maybe the angle of the stone, polishing stone. And what's very important is you cannot be in a drafty area. You cannot be in a very hot room. So in the adobe buildings, they're very cool. So when we sit down, we have to make sure that there's no draft coming in, because that would dry your slip before its final polish is achieved.
It's taken me many, many years to learn how to polish, and sometimes I forget, and I have to remember how I did it before. But it takes quite a while in capturing the shine. And with mine, I like to get even high shine, so it takes me a little bit longer. But with my mom, she can polish fast. More experience, I guess. All the stones that I use come from walking and hunting, and as I used to do a lot of hunting. And so these are just from riverbeds, and over time, using them, they get better and better and better. My stones tend to be large because they fit my hand pretty well. I do have ancestral stones that are even larger, I think, for the giant storage jars. And those I use on occasion when I make big pots.
And the thing about polishing without realizing it, that way back when, every now and then, my grandparents, my grandmother would lick their stone. Why? Because there's buildup that occurs, and we need to remove that, because if you don't, it'll pick up the other slip, and you'll have a little spot that's showing the bottom of the pot instead of a smooth, even, polished surface. So that's what Cavan is doing, is licking his pot. The slip.
Yeah, it tastes good.
And people think that we put a glaze over it. It's not a glaze, it's just a slip deposit that's highly burnished. And before this process became known as black on black ware that my great grandmother made famous, the initial pots that we made were our cooking pots, and they were made out of mica. So our initial cooking pots were mica made, mica ware, and on some of the bottoms of my pots, you have the mica surface. This is what Cavan is trying to achieve, is the nice polished look. At this particular stage, you become protective of your pots. You don't let anybody touch it. Because keep in mind, your fingers are constantly giving off moisture. So if you've got your dampness on your hand without knowing, or even grease, depending on what you ate, it'll leave an imprint on the pot, but it won't be visible until after the firing. After the firing, you'll see the smudge marks and the handprints. So in order to prevent that, no one touches the pots except the designer. So this is using a steady pressure all over and polishing it gradually. There are various polishing stones that have different shapes and curvature depending on how you are using it, that you'll see indentation marks. After the demonstration, we'll let people look at the pieces and see them. Because his hands are big, I wouldn't use this big pieces because they're too big for me. The stone is too heavy. So my stones are different. People ask, are the pots signed with a pencil or a pen? I said, no, they're not. They're signed with a sharp, pointed polishing stone. I had one on here, but Cavan removed it. So my great-grandmother and my grandmother, Santana, would sign with a sharp, pointed polishing stone. And the person that signed the pieces might be Maria, it might be Santana, because depending on who handled the last ware, they're the ones that put the signature on it. So therefore, the signatures will not all vary, but I can tell because I've seen it throughout my lifetime. But, to verify it, usually the shape and the design will tell you that it's a Maria and Santana piece or a Maria and Julian piece. But they didn't use a pencil. They used a sharp polishing stone. With mine, my pieces my Indian name is so long that I etch on top with anything sharp that I feel comfortable with. And so my signature, Tamui, is etched on the bottom of my pots. How long have I been doing pottery? I've been doing pottery since I was a little girl, working alongside, watching my great-grandmother, starting out with animals. No matter what age you are, if you're going to begin making pottery, then you start from the bottom. You start making animal shapes. Animal shapes because it gives you contour. You need to have the head, the legs, the tail, or whatever it might have, but it gives you a sense of feeling through your fingers. And then the next thing you do is start making bows. After you've done that a while, then you start making the bows, the little pinch pots. After you've done that for a while, as the pots grow, your animals grow, so does the ability to polish. So when you're first polishing again, you start with the animals because it gives you not just going round and round like Cavan is doing, but with the animals, you got to think about the neck, the legs, the stuff. So you're telling yourself, I must pace myself a little faster or a little slower to get all the different parts. So that's how all my children and my grandchildren have learned, is doing animals and working their way up, making bowls. Making pinch pots first, which this one is. And as long as the pot fits on the palm of your hand, it will be a pinch. So this is a pinch bowl. In fact, this is Cavan's daughter's bowl. Andrita, and she's what, 9, 10?
10.
10 years old, and this is one of hers from one of the past display exhibit that we had. This is yours truly, but now as the pots grow, so does the design work varies as well. So far, I've been fortunate and I've only got one son that has attempted design work, and that's Cavan with his polychrome. And then he's got black on black as well, and red and black, like yours truly, but he's the only one that so far has showed an interest and is doing design work. My other sons also have talent, but they have not worked with clay. There's a different feeling, a different texture, flat versus curved. It's different. And the brushes that Cavan will be using is made from a yucca. These are yucca blades made of various shapes, and you can see them later on, and they've been cut in various style and shape that you would like. So you can vary the width of your brush. And as we need them, my grandfather, I always used to tease him. He would demonstrate how to make a yucca brush. So he would chew on the tips, expose the fibers very gently, separate them, clean it, and then you shape it, and that's what is used for all the linear work. And there's a little trick to doing the design work. That's what I mean. Some people just design, some people just do that. But, there's a different state of mind that occurs. My husband tells me, oh, you're running out of red pottery, you better do red. You're running out of black, you got to do black. I said, you can't think like that. You can't jump from one to another. Each requires a different mode of thinking and a different way of viewing it. The polychrome, you're working with red, black, and tan. With the black on black ware, you're only working with two colors. The black, which was initially red to begin with, and the black becomes the shiny surface that you'll see Cavan working on, and the matte surface on the blackware. So there's only two colors you're actually working with. And the pieces are completely polished, and then the design is put on top of there. So people ask, do you put this polish in between the designs? I said, no, it's completely polished, and then the design is applied on there. How far do you think you are, Cavan?
I don't know what time it is. It's 2 o'clock.
Yeah, just design on that one.
Well, this kind of gives you an idea for polishing, and for me, polishing, I could polish probably almost to about a full hour plus, depending on size of piece. But I like the way this is coming out. It's coming out pretty cool.
Yeah, while he's finishing up on that a little bit more, and time will be running out. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Barbara, I know you put spiders on a lot of your pieces, because I have one. But you put it on all the pieces, and does it have any symbolism?
Well, the question was, you put spiders on a lot of your pieces, and he was asking what the symbolism of the spiders was.
The spider is a symbol of good luck for me. Back in 1970, when Cavan was born, and this is actually where my professional pottery making began. Even though I was doing it throughout my lifetime, I helped with my family and making pottery, and then I went on to college, met my husband, and we were away at school, and I was getting bored waiting for Kevin to be born. So then my grandmother would come up and visit, my mother, my grandparents, and my grandmother brought me up some clay, and she said, well, maybe you need to get busy, start working on pots. So that's where it began, that I started making pots officially in 1970, and to say that that was going to be my livelihood. And I got interested in it more and more, and as the years continued, 2-3 years later, I said, I got to come up with my own logo, that's something that is truly mine. And I had, in my travels, had not seen spiders on a pot. So then I was saying, oh, spider came into being, so I started using spiders on my pot, and they became my good luck symbol. Then with the etch work, the webbing evolved slowly after that. Back in the early 70s, we had a show, my great-grandmother, Maria, my grandmother, Santana and Adam, grandparents, my mother, Anita, and myself, with the Smithsonian Institute, and at one of the galleries, and there is where I introduced, or how would I say, more attention was being given to my swish pots. So the pictures were taken, and it was circulated, the pictures went around the world, and that was what made my swish pots famous. The swish pots have noisemakers inside it, and a symbol of good luck and wishes, the spider on it, and I would encourage people to shake it and make a wish. I had people send me baby teeth that they wanted me to place inside the pot, so it's a life-keeping souvenir or treasure piece, and that's how the swish pots came into being. And after that, the spiders traveled around the world. In fact, there was a car, if you recall, spider car. Spider-Man, I won't be surprised. Ties.
You invented Spider-Man?
No,
That's great.
no, but Spider-Man could have come out of the design.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm curious what your great-grandmother told you about the early heydays of this, about being at World's Fairs and things like that. Did she share memories of what those early days were like?
She did, but as growing up as a little girl, living with her, having so many people, famous artists that would come and see her, it didn't faze me who they were. All I knew is they were famous people. But just like traveling to different places, been to the White House, being guests of the presidents, but in all the times and the years that we traveled, there were very many people that came into being, and one of the things that struck me as a young child was that, traveling and being exposed to all these different artists and art types. But before we begin, I think Kevin is ready to talk about the brushes.
Yeah, like my mom talked about a little while ago, when I make my brushes, I get the yucca leaves from the yucca plant, chew them down to the fibers, and then I cut into, depending on what kind of width of lines you want. Because we're running out of time, I don't want to rush on this coming out nice. For the feather design, I just take the brush and just slowly design downward, and that leaves you the design foundation, and then I go back and curve the feather on the bottom, or if I design other designs on the belly area. Like my mom's signature on most of all of her pots is the spider. Mine's is the tadpole, along with my Indian name Eagle Tail. So somewhere on all my pots, there's a tadpole that I would put as a part of the design, and that separates my work from all generations past, because sometimes some of my pieces do resemble reflections of the past of my family's work. But this is a continuation of the same ancestral, I would say, I guess, know-how of using a paintbrush traditionally. And I do have other brushes there as well, too. Some for filling in portions of design. And my kids have smaller hands, so I try and also sometimes make them a little bit shorter. That way it's easier for them to handle. But I encourage my kids to watch the different stages that they can. If I'm working, usually working the kitchen table, that way I'm watching them. But that way they could see the different processes, different stages done.
So,
I go fill in.
so for the polishing phase, this is the red slip that is just dissolved in water. It's a hard clay, hard as a rock. And the next, for the slip design, is another clay deposit, and it's almost as hard as a rock, but all we do is soak it in water and it will become a design slip.
That clay, same clay that we use for design work is the same that I use for foundation for the polychrome. It turns to the tan. For the polychrome, the same clay turns gray in the firing for the black on black pottery. So it's the same material, same usage of clay, different method.
Anybody have any other questions?
Could you explain how you make the mat and the surface on black? I mean, you explained that the polish is underneath, but do you then scrape away the polish and that becomes the mat? Or how does that happen?
After we burnish the whole entire piece, then we take our the gray, which is found as kind of like a rock clay, paint the design on top of the red shiny, and then we take that piece with design and fire it black. All the painted design area turns to the matte, or what's referred to as the black on black. So it's the same material usage of clay, just different firing.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, here's one here.
On a pot that has a repeating pattern around, on a pot that has a repeating pattern around the pot, I don't understand how you can possibly make it come out even going around.
Years and years of practice.
And many mistakes later, it looks nice and uniform.
Yeah.
But you also have to take into consideration spatial context. And you don't get that looking at a piece. You actually learn by doing the process over and over and over.
If you were to take a ruler and place it exactly on every little thing, it won't come out.
It won't come
all
out
different.
because the shapes are hand done versus a machine thing that the surface is completely even because of the machinery. Whereas with hands, it might have a little bump, it might have a little groove, but eventually all the lines should line up. Yes?
This is actually an anecdote. I have a dear friend who was just died in '93 in Taos, and his family had a curio shop on Kit Carson Road when he was a child. They sold Maria Martinez pots for $5, a grave family mistake. They did not keep them at the time, and a treasured memory, however.
Yeah, we traveled a lot with my great-grandmother, taking pots to different places in La Fonda hotels, Grand Canyon, Fred Harvey hotels, Phoenix, Arizona, and a lot of times after we left the place, they would put them in vaults. And I mean, I looked in some of the vaults, and there were the Maria pieces all stacked up. But the thing about that is it continued, our economy base was solid, meaning that we could depend on pottery for a livelihood. And without my great-grandmother traveling, it would have not been possible. The person that helped her travel and set up different things was my great-uncle, Popovide, Maria's third son. Maria's oldest son was my grandfather, Adam. He was a farmer, and he helped in the pottery making and raising his brothers and sisters after his father passed on. And he had a brother named Juan Diego Martinez, and he went by John D., and he went to Stanford, played football. And I don't think, he never finished, but the war came on, and then the third son, Popovide, went to service. John D. went to service. Popovide joined the service. John D. served in the army, in the service, and the youngest son, Philip, joined in the service as well. And this is where this photo comes into being. When the people came to visit, the Fred Harvey tours would come to the Pueblo, and they would be the modern transportation. Back then in the 50s, not many people had cars. So I remember as a child boarding the tour vans. It was like a stretched limo from what I recall. And we would take a ride, we would pay, and one of the times I remember very vividly because that was my first and last ride in one of those limos. My parents were taking me to the hospital for some reason. Maybe, I don't recall what it is, but all I know is I was fascinated sitting inside those tour, I wouldn't call them bus, tour vans, stretch limos, and sitting there watching the things go by as I was looking out the window. And it would give us a ride. It would pick us up at the Pueblo at the corner where it meets State Highway 84, I believe. But anyway, right at the Pueblo, and then the stop was always at my great-grandmother's place. So we made a stop there if they had people and tourists wanted to see and look at my great-grandmother's work. After that, it would continue on to Santa Fe. So I remember traveling in that stretch limo, is what I would call it, but it was a big car as a little girl, and sitting there, and we made a stop in La Fonda, and then it went on. See, our main goal was to get to IHS Hospital, Santa Fe Indian Hospital, down Cerrillos Road. So stopping at La Fonda, dropping people if they were in there, I was too busy looking around. I didn't really pay attention to what was going on. I was looking at the scenery and being proud to sit in the ride. And it had, they serviced the vehicles and on Cerrillos Road, and that building is still there in back of the cemetery where Oddfellows is. If some of you are familiar with Santa Fe area, there's a warehouse back there. It's still there. And that's where the La Fonda, the detour, the tour vans were stopping. And we got a ride as far as there, and then we walked to PHS Hospital to that point, and then that was my glorious ride as I remember back then. But then anytime anybody wanted a ride to Santa Fe, that was how they got to Santa Fe, riding those tour vans and stopping here and there as they went, but eventually got them to Santa Fe. So that was my very memorable ride on the vans. And, not many people went on those rides way back when because it was actually supposed to be for tourists, but the driver would furnish ride to Indian people that needed it. Yes.
Hi, George, I'm really delighted to see the demonstration. I'm not a potter, so I have no direct experience with clay work. Am I correct in assuming that the reason Maria Martinez became so famous was that she and Julian had rediscovered what had been a lost process? Is that what the case was?
No, they bettered the process. What they had seen, black pottery was always done at San Ildefonso, but not rounded, not smoothly shaped, not highly polished, not maybe very little, if any at all, design work on there, but it was just used as a utilitarian purposes as a bowl. They knew it couldn't serve as a boiling pot because that's what the mica ware was used for, but it served as a serving bowl and maybe to pour hot liquid in there and you consumed it, but it couldn't hold anything very long. So what my great-grandfather was recruited to work on the Frijoles Canyon, Bandelier now known as, in that area, excavating that area with other men. In fact, my grandfather on my father's side was one of those that was recruited as well to help. And they found pottery sherds that were polished. So I can't think of his name. I lost his name. The bandolier guy? Edgar Hewitt wanted a duplication, so he knew that my grandmother and them were already good at making pottery. And keep in mind that my grandparents had, people of long time ago bartered with whatever they made. So now in my travels and going through different ceremonies, I've seen their pots being used in different pueblos. So keep in mind that was a trade-in tool way back when. So they were trading with their polychrome ware to the different pueblos. As the tourist trade began, the trains were coming. That was made the black on black ware travel from East Coast to West Coast. And that's how they began, is trying to duplicate what Dr. Hewitt wanted them to do. So when he noticed they were making it nicer, rounder, more polished, better design work, keep in mind that they were already well known in their polychrome world. So what they did was transfer what they knew about the black that they were reviving. They already knew how to put a design work, but not which slips would work. So through an experimentation of their own, they found certain clays would work with the slip design. And why do I know it only works in certain clays? Because I've used others. You could put the slip design on, and if the clay did not bind to the polished surface, after the firing, you take it and you wipe it and the design work comes off. It did not hold on to the clay. So it still applies now, even with the polychrome ware. If it does not go into the pot itself and cling on, after the firing, it would all come off. So there was your work done. I tried to revive the polychrome when my great-grandmother was alive, and I finally did about 2 or 3 years before she passed on. And I fired several pieces, each of them with different clays, and I finally got the right one that shot the clays, and they stuck together, and my great-grandmother was happy. She couldn't remember how my great-grandfather mixed the clays to get it to hold on to different clay bodies. But, so she just, what she knew very little, so I had to experiment on my own, how to get the black on, how to get the red on, how to put the white on. So the different colors of clays. And keep in mind that back then, the reservation was open land. The lands there were no fences around. They didn't have to ask permission. They just went and gathered clays. But back in the 50s and 60s, when the fences all went up, the 40s, 30s, now we can't get back into those certain areas to retrieve different clays, but through understanding, we do get it, but most of the clay is found on our reservation. Why? Because they could only travel so far for the raw materials. So they had to experiment, and with that, getting acquainted with the bandolier group and the tours that happened, that's how black on black became well known. I was telling my husband, I'm trying to remember as a little girl way back when, because of this lecture, how did they transport their pots? As growing up, my great-grandparents had a store. And in the store, in the storage room, by the time I lived with them, it was closed, but there were barrels here and there. So I would ask, how come there's a lot of wooden barrels in here? And my grandmother told me, that's how they ship pottery from one place to the other. They loaded the barrels with pottery and put it on the train, and there it went. So those wine barrels is what they, heavy, as big as they were, that's what they put the pots in to ship it from one end of the country to the next. Okay, before we conclude.
We have one more question. Go ahead. I can't get the microphone. Say it and I'll repeat.
Stephen,
Ask her.
please ask.
I can hear.
She's right here.
He needs to record, I guess. But anyway, Harvey Weekend, I would really be appreciative of reflections, traditions, anything as to the relationship between the Harvey organization and the Pueblos and the tribes, positive, negative, over the years.
There is a lot of positive, meaning that it brought tourists to our Pueblo. Growing up, there were only 3 major families that did pottery work. the Martinez family, and Rose Gonzales family, and Blue Corn. Blue Corn is my husband's father's sister. They were raised as brother and sister. So those were only the three families. From there on, the family of Potters branched out.
Were there any aspects of it that could have been better? I mean, obviously, every business relationship has its highs and its lows. So I'm curious whether, I mean, there were stories when your great-grandmother was at the 1915 World's Fair. There certainly were many of the tribes from New Mexico who thought they weren't being treated properly. Some of them left, actually, in the middle of the summer because they felt that the filming that had been done on your pueblo had hurt the crops. So, I mean, did any of that pass down to you from your great-grandmother? Did you ever hear about any of that?
No, because we're always told her stress is that think positive. Always be happy. Always be happy and make good with what you can do. And this is where service comes in. I have a sister that you might have heard of that runs Tewa Women United. I'm a part initially of that group, and they work with different programming. So if it wasn't possible, you know, of my great-grandmother going out and instilling it in us to be a service to the public. I have relatives that work in the forest industry and, you know, the hotel industry. There have been some that have worked in the La Fonda hotels, the Fred Harvey, and again, we wouldn't have traveled if we didn't know Fred Harvey stores were going to buy her pots. They would always buy it in Phoenix, Flagstaff, Grand Canyon, Colorado Springs, here in Santa Fe. So it allowed my great-grandmother to travel. So when my great-uncle passed away, Popovi Day, then yours truly started taking my great-grandmother around and make sure that she got from A to B and back home again. About this thing about the Harvey people not wondering if, you know, how it influenced the different people. Keep in mind that Indian people always had ceremonies during the summer and during the time that maybe they were at this, they had to get home. Any excuse was better than no excuse at all. Ceremony became the #1 thing that sent them home. And they were very proud that they could go out and serve in the public.
May I add to your question? I think what might be better for you or any other people that might want more info is to meet up with her, you know, separately from here and find out more. Because there is a lot. There's a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe next year for Fred Harvey Weekend, we'll have a tour. Anyway, we're going to stop here. But